Hello, welcome to today's webinar on new requirements for fraud prevention. My name is Renasha Durla and I'll be your moderator today. I'm happy to have with us Julie Conroy, Research Director at Aite Group, and Luis Rojas, who is the Head of Products at Guardian Analytics. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and we will send you the slides and the link to the recorded webinar afterwards. If you have any questions, you can type your questions in the Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen, and it will be answered at the end of the webinar. I would now like to turn the presentation over to Julie.
Great, thanks Renasha, and thanks for everybody's time today. We're going to spend the next 40 minutes or so discussing the fraud prevention landscape, which probably most of you on the phone are only too well aware of the rising threat environment and the need to continue to iterate forward what we're doing to defend financial services and our customers. One of the key challenges that we're up against is just the vast amount of data that is at the criminal's disposal. So this graphic just gives a flavor for the 477 million records. That was just the compromises in 2015 alone. And the data includes stolen card numbers. It includes reams of PII taken from healthcare companies. It includes lots and lots of online credential pairs that actually, as you look at the prices in the underweb, the credential pairs are gleaning the highest price as criminals go to sell them because they have so much utility in use for subsequent fraud attacks. So as we look at those attack vectors, spoiling the punchline here, but the criminal's favorite approach is to perpetrate attacks that include lots of different specific attack methodologies, and not to limit their attacks across any single channel or product, but attack institutions across channels and across products. How do they do this? The hacking still is front and center, using various techniques to compromise a vulnerability and then infiltrate a company's network. We still see ample use of malware, and the trend line of malware production continues to ramp up. We see lots of social engineering as the criminals manipulate the people in the call centers so that they can surrender confidential information that can then be used in the attacks. And insider threats. We see people that are either disgruntled employees or people that have specifically been planted within an organization for the express purposes of stealing sensitive data. One of the other contributing factors to the rapid rise of fraud attacks and fraud losses is that innovation is rapidly expanding the attack surface. So as we see things coming down the pike, such as faster payments and same-day ACH, the countries that have preceded the U.S. have already felt some of the pain associated with those, as the time that financial institutions have to risk assess a transaction gets dramatically condensed, and so you have to figure out whether a transaction is good in a much more rapid time frame. Innovations like Facebook Messenger, where we're now seeing that customers can interact with financial institutions and merchants via these types of channels, which brings a whole new set of questions about how do you authenticate that end user, who is performing the authentication, what transactions do you allow to happen via the Facebook Messenger channel, and what do you then require the customer to actually exit the channel and come and interact via the financial institution's own app or website. And then just all of the different form factors that consumers now use to interact with their financial institution. Mobile tablets, telephone, branch, computer. And from a customer's perspective, they expect these interactions to be seamless. They have a demand that the same types of transactions that are available to them in an online environment are available to them in mobile. And more we're seeing mobile-first consumers. Around 50% of all consumers that are accessing via a mobile device are mobile only. And so that really reinforces the need for financial institutions to provide the transaction capability via mobile, but then more importantly, they also have to secure it. So as we dive down into those specific attack vectors, we're still seeing a large amount of malware enter the ecosystem. And unfortunately, there's very little in the way of deterrent to the organized crime rings that are behind these attacks. They purposely spread themselves across geographic borders, and so when we do see the headlines about the FBI or a series of international agencies making a big bust, unfortunately those are still more the exception than the rule, because it's just so hard to coordinate across countries to go after these organized crime rings. As a result, we continue to see basically just a hockey stick growth of both the online and the mobile malware. Mobile is obviously still dwarfed by online, but it's growing at a more rapid pace. And we are seeing that more and more of the mobile malware is malicious rather than just purely nuisance. That is reflective of the fact that we are seeing so much of the transaction volume in mobile is increasingly high risk. And so there's, again, an increased attack surface for criminals as they go after the increasing number of transactions that are going through mobile. We're also seeing that as financial institutions have gotten better at detecting and preventing things like corporate account takeover, criminals are going up the funnel and they're attacking the corporate and small business customer directly. And so we've seen a huge increase in business email compromise over the past couple of years, where the criminals will hack into a network or through a database breach, they will acquire a set of credentials for a high-ranking corporate officer. They will compromise that individual's email account, and then they will send an email to the CFO or the controller saying, please send a wire for $250,000 to XYZ vendor. Here are the wiring instructions. Many times this email goes against corporate practice, but people are in such a act and react mode that many times the CFO or the controller just acts on that request. FBI has estimated that from mid-2013 through the end of 2015, there has been $1 billion of losses. As I talk to financial institution executives, they actually think that that is a conservative estimate. And what we're seeing is the average loss per victim is $100,000. These attacks aren't necessarily hitting the headlines in quite the same way that corporate account takeover did, because at the end of the day, the losses really are entirely the fault of that small to medium-sized business, so they don't have grounds to sue their financial institution as they were with corporate account takeover. However, the good news is that we're seeing that with appropriate detection tools, many financial institutions are finding that they are able to catch many of these because it is an anomalous activity for that business. And once they get through the difficult conversation of convincing that CFO or controller that they've been duped, many of the FIs I talk to that are successfully catching this business email compromise attack say that that small to medium-sized business is a customer for life after that, because they're so grateful that that six-figure loss was prevented by that financial institution. While online has long been a very attractive target for the criminals, we are seeing that the mobile channel is continuing to increase in attractiveness. One of the reasons for this is that we are seeing that the logins to the mobile banking channel are ramping up so considerably. So we actually saw the tipping point in 2013 where mobile logins for the first time outpaced online logins. Now, this doesn't mean that we yet have more mobile consumers. What it means is that mobile consumers are much more engaged and much more active than the typical online banking user. And so as we look at this tipping point, your average mobile banking user logs in 14 to 17 times per month versus the online banking user who logs in about 4 to 5 times per month. And as we do get more and more users of mobile banking, we're going to see that the discrepancy will continue. unfortunately, fraudsters are also recognizing this, and so we're seeing mobile factor very prominently, particularly in cross-channel attacks that involve more than one channel. And as we look at cross-channel, the contact center is already very much in the criminal sights. So we just last week actually published some research in which we interviewed 25 executives from 18 U.S. financial institutions. These institutions all had more than $50 billion in assets. And one of the many questions we asked is, are your contact center losses trending up? Are they down, or are they flat? And as you can see from this graphic, 28% of the respondents said that they're up between 1 and 10%. Another 33% of our respondents said that they're up between 11 and 25%. And 17% of the folks that we spoke with said that their contact center losses are up 17% or more over the last couple of years. The only folks that said that their contact center losses were down were actually those that also said that they have deployed technology to specifically address the contact center fraud problem over the past couple of years. Notably, 17% said that their losses were either flat or don't know. The vast majority of those folks didn't know. They actually don't have the tracking today to be able to isolate the account takeover loss back to the contact center. So the author of the report for Aite Group actually dubbed the contact center one of the key fraud enablement channels, just because it is figuring so prominently into so many account takeover attacks. And as we interviewed these FIs, over half of them believe that the contact center is a major issue, and having that visibility into the cross-channel activity of the individual as they're interacting with the FI is key, because the fraud doesn't usually stop with the contact center. Then they take the credentials that they have been able to trick that call center rep into giving them, and they leverage those online, and that's where the actual losses take place. Unfortunately, as we look at the other dynamics in the U.S. market right now, as the U.S. moves to EMV, this is only going to exacerbate the current account takeover problem that we're seeing here. One of the good things about being one of the last G20 countries to move to EMV, actually the last G20 country, is that we can look to other countries that have gone before us and learn from their experiences. The UK had its liability shift in 2006, and as we see from this graphic, we saw immediately thereafter a rise in account takeover. Again, as counterfeit fraud works its way out of the system, criminals start shifting their activity to other forms of fraud. The UK banks deployed some compensating technology that addressed it for a bit, and so we saw a dip in 2011, but the criminals quickly adjusted in turn, and we're seeing the fraud rising very rapidly again in the UK. One of the challenges as the US is moving to EMV is that we're doing so at a time where we have a huge amount of data already in criminals' hands in the form of credentials and PII. So unfortunately, there's a bit of a perfect storm taking place right now, as criminals are going to be motivated to shift tactics as their counterfeit fraud opportunity rapidly decreases, and at the same time they have ready availability of data to perpetrate account takeover with. So to that end, we really need to be building our security with the assumption that the bad guys are going to breach the perimeter. And so we need to be able to have a better capability to analyze transactions and behavior patterns to detect that anomalous activity that results. One way that many institutions are looking to better protect the user experience is by requiring authentication. And having a layered approach is definitely a best practice. It's actually required by FFIEC in the US market. But you really need to consider your layers and consider how you use them. Even though the password still counts as a layer according to FFIEC requirements, I think most security professionals realize that the passwords days as a security mechanism are long since over. It's effectively a database lookup tool at this point and not much else. And as you look at some of the other forms of authentication, they do have more of a, they do bring more friction to the user experience. So as I talk to FIs that are looking to balance their ability to do fraud detection with the ability to have a good user experience and get more customers using their digital channels, that balancing act is top of mind for many of them. We also need to keep in mind that there really is no silver bullet. Things like a biometric at the end of the day is still a static data element. So as we're looking at bringing new forms of authentication into the ecosystem, it still has to be done in a layered method, because at the end of the day, fraudsters have proven themselves very capable at bypassing one-time passwords and biometrics and basically every other authenticator that we want to throw in their path. It's not to say that they're ineffective, they just need to be used in conjunction with other technologies. One of the technologies that has gaining a lot of favor with the FIs that I speak with are behavioral analytics. Last year, I surveyed 19 of the largest FIs in North America. Again, 50 billion in assets and above. And one of the questions I asked them are, what types of technologies are you using to secure your digital channels? As you can see here, 37% of the FIs I spoke with were using 2 different types of behavioral analytics. And so they were using complementary types, but behavioral analytics were very much in favor with this group. 42% were using one solution. Only 11% of the folks I spoke with didn't have any behavioral analytic deployed at all. And the reason that these were so favored was that this can be kind of your first line of defense that operates behind the scenes. It has no impact on the customer experience, but it does have the ability to help surface those anomalous activities that really do require much closer attention and present the highest risk to the institution and its customers. So as I talk to financial institutions about the best practices that they're using to get ahead of the bad guys, anomaly detection is something that comes up very frequently in conversation. Having the ability to analyze transactions to understand, is this consistent with the behavior of my customer? Is this the type of transaction that they usually make? Is this when they usually make the transaction? Also having the ability to examine, how is that user interacting with my website or mobile app? Is this the way that my user typically does this? And optimally, having the ability to perform this analysis across all channels. And so not looking just at online, just at mobile, but bringing in the holistic picture of the interaction of the user with all of the channels of the financial institution. Also looking at the interactions across the products, because criminals don't limit their attacks to any one product, even though unfortunately many institutions still have their fraud prevention capabilities sometimes siloed on a product-by-product basis. Criminals will, get in there and they will maximize their opportunity across lending products, DDA products, whatever the product may be. So it's really important to have a full product view in the analysis as well. And ideally, the majority of that analysis and the majority of your fraud prevention activity is going to be transparent to the end user, because the vast majority of the folks that come in and interact with you are going to be good users, and you want to provide them with that delightful customer experience. Anymore, banks aren't necessarily competing with each other in the digital environment. as much as they are competing with the consumer brands that are shaping all of our expectations of what a digital experience should be like. So as you are crafting your digital experience, you're competing with Apple and Amazon, because those are the folks that are setting the bar of expectation for that end user of what it should be like to transact online or via a mobile device. Yeah, it's a tough time to be the person responsible for fraud prevention for a financial institution, because at the same time that we're striving to provide this delightful experience and striving to remove friction from the experience, we're also seeing that the account takeover losses are rapidly rising. So this is actually one of the first groups to see this research. We just published research today based on interviews that I performed over the past 3 months with large financial institutions. So I spoke with 16 of the largest FIs and 4 of the largest processors about what's taking place in the credit and debit card environment. And as we look, collectively, the banks that I spoke with represent about 76% of the outstanding credit card holder base, about 69% of the debit card holder base in the U.S. market. And as I talked to these financial institutions and processors about, as we have moved to EMV, what kind of fraud shifts are we seeing? Many of them were saying, well, it's too early to blame this on EMV, because right now we're only at about 20% ship-on-ship transactions for credit, about 10% ship-on-ship for debit. But the reality is that over the course of 2015, we saw a sharp uptick in account takeover. And this is account takeover focusing on card products and DDA products as well. It's just the result of all of this data that's at the criminals' disposal right now. And so we're seeing the criminals come at us from a bunch of different directions. We saw a big spike. We're going to continue to see that rising tide as EMV continues to take hold in the U.S. market, and we see the 4 billion or so of counterfeit card start to work its way out of the system. And just like that old fraud analogy of squeezing the balloon, it's going to work its way over into other fraud attack vectors, account takeover being one. So by 2020, unfortunately, we expect to see account takeover in the U.S. top $1 billion. With that little burst of sunshine, I'm going to turn it over to Luis, who will discuss some of the solutions to the problem.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much for setting the context for us. Good morning, everyone. We're going to be talking about Guardian Analytics' new Omni-channel Fraud Prevention solution, which we're in the process of launching. And what we'd like to take you through is a brief overview of the solution itself, as well as a demonstration of the visual analytics. One second while I adjust my audio here. Okay. All right. One of the by way of introduction, for those of you that may not be familiar with Guardian Analytics, we currently are proud to be able to support over 400 client financial institutions and over 40 million consumer and commercial accounts, which total in the trillions of dollars in the aggregate. And that represents 5 to 6 billion transactions in all types of activities, different channels, mobile, online, P2P, ACH, wire, etc. We integrate and have turnkey integrations with a number of different vendors and solution providers in the space, which has given us a lot of insight into the data itself and having the ability to perform richer analysis because of that. When we look at omni-channel, and Julie set the context beautifully here, there's a number of different institutions that have done a great job in protecting each channel. They've put in layer security for their online channel, branch, mobile, etc. But it is a multi-vendor ecosystem, so sometimes it's difficult to get that 360-degree insight into customer interactions, how the customer is behaving based on the channel, and then indirectly how the fraudster is attacking and taking advantage of the different channels in order to compromise the account, to gain intelligence, to do reconnaissance, staging, etc. So we're going to be going through each of these layers that comprise the omni-channel solution in turn. But at first, we're going to focus on the omni-channel visual analytics, which is the presentation layer. And here, the key design goal is to allow the fraud analyst professional within your organizations to have a unique consolidated view of all these various channels. Now we provide solutions today for online retail and business banking, mobile retail and business banking, ACH, both for originated and received ACH transactions, wire, cross-border transfers, foreign exchange transfers, as well as protecting online portals for non-financial functions, for instance, your employee benefits portals, etc. So by having a consolidated view of all of these and being able to see the alerts side by side, first of all, we start breaking down the silos of these various solutions. So it gives you a rich context to be able to see how activity in one channel may escalate and elevate risk in a different channel. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to switch over to a online demo so you can see what the user experience will be like. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to be John Doe, star fraud analyst for a Midwestern institution, and I'm going to go ahead and log into the Omni-channel Fraud Prevention solution. And the first thing I see is the dashboard. From here, I can get a bird's eye view of all the trends that are affecting my institution today. I can see a alert volume by channel, so it gives me an idea of how much the transaction overall volume is accruing, and this can be aggregated up by week, by quarter, by month, to give you again a sense of how the transactions are spread across my various channels. I can also get shorter time frames. For instance, I can look at my daily alerts for high red alerts or medium yellow alerts on a daily basis. And again, they can be aggregated across different channels or filtered for a specific channel. Or I can get longer trends that maybe reveal different factors such as my customer acquisition rate, etc. But to begin the day's investigation, I'm going to switch over to the Alerts tab. And then here, I'm going to now, instead of just seeing one particular channel, such as online business, for example, or wire, here I'm seeing a combination of both. So as a member of this organization, I've selected that I'm going to look at business and wire, and I have my view filtered here for that search criteria. And I can see here that each of these rows represents a unique alert. So I can see that they're labeled clearly by application, so I can see my wire alerts and online alerts side by side. And I'm going to take you through a brief scenario where a fraudster uses information in the online channel to compromise a template and then relies on the legitimate user to originate a wire to send data to a mule account that they control. So as I begin my investigation, I can sort by application, I can sort by risk level, I can scroll over and see all of the various risk indicators for online, for example. So I can see what is elevated risk. I can also look at wire alerts and then see the fields and risk contributors that are related to the wire alerts channel. One thing I like here is that my score and account information is always visible to me. If I sort by risk, I see that the highest alert here today is by Acme Incorporated. So I'm just going to filter my view here to say Acme, and I see that I have a 9.2 red alert in the online channel and a 3.3 yellow alert in the wired channel. I'm also going to just collapse these columns here to focus in on the risk factors, which are my risk contributors, the activity that caused the alerts that contributed the most to the alert level, and I'm also going to sort by time. So I see that those two are in fact the highest level alerts for this particular account. And I zeroed in on this account because I know this happens to be a very profitable account for my institution, so I want to focus on that. I'm going to select that alert, and then by double-clicking on it, it brings up a heat map of all the activities and sessions and transactions that this account has transacted with my bank. So I'm looking at Acme Incorporated here. This bar indicates that this is the highest red alert that requires investigation, and right next to it I have a yellow alert. Now, by scrolling the view here, these swim lanes indicate that this particular alert happened in the online channel, and it started with a failed login, bad credentials, and then followed by a multi-factor authentication failure. And then sometime during that session, the user changed their password, and then there was also an online wire submitted or a template submitted. As I continue to scroll down here, I see that for the online channel, the risk contributors are things like account modified, so it's giving me additional context as to what happened, unusual location, network provider, and suspicious IP address, etc. So that's enough to raise concerns, but I can also double-click on this to get even more detail. So this dialog box, let me just drag it out of the way here, tells me a minute-by-minute account of what happened. And the items that are underlined in red indicate where the elevated risk cap or anomalous activities. These are things that this particular account usually never does. They never fail the login, or they seldom fail it. They seldom fail authentication, etc. And as I look through here, I noticed that this wire transfer template was approved. So my attention is drawn to that. The name of the template is AP Payments 2016, and I noticed that these two fields were modified, the credit account number and the routing number. Now, why is that important? Well, as I look at my timeline here, the very next alert is a yellow alert. If I click on that, this updates to show me that that was a wire alert. So this came from my payments hub in the back-end system rather than the online channel. Again, I can see here that was a transaction that happened in the wire channel. It was initiated by Jane Edwards, and I can see here as I scroll down the wire risk factors that contributed to the overall alert. I also have further confirmation that that particular wire transaction was based on the template that was modified in the adjacent online session. So this gives me a lot of contextual information here so that I can have a very productive conversation with my account. If I need to get on the phone and talk to Jane, I can have a lot of information right here at my fingertips to verify what happened and ask some productive questions, have a focused discussion, and based on the results of that, I may just then right-click the particular alert and decide to whether to release the wire or cancel the wire. So this is enough suspicious information where I'm going to go ahead and cancel the wire, which had been previously placed on hold. That'll send a directive back to the payment system to say, please do not pay that wire because I've verified that it is, in fact, a fraudulent transaction. So to summarize here, you can see that in just a few minutes I was able to zero in on a particularly worrying scenario. The juxtaposition of both of these alerts next to each other with the relevant information helped me to have a very good conversation with my account. The account is happy that we saved them money, and I'm able to get my investigation done in a fairly quick manner, and also the fact that I'm feeding this information into the system allows me to stop the payments automatically. So I'm going to now switch back to our slides to just summarize some of the other layers that comprise the omni-channel solution. So we just looked at the top layer, which is the visual analytics. Another layer that I want to draw your attention to is the integrated risk database. So one of the key factors here is that Guardian Analytics curates data from multiple sources, our own internal investigations, law enforcement sources, government sources, etc. And we can feed information into here that acts as overlay data to enrich and augment risk scoring. But more importantly, now with the advent of omni-channel, it allows you to do the same thing with your specific data. So you can automatically load case management data from your incident reporting systems, from your enterprise case management system. You can upload very relevant account data. For example, you can say I want to load a list of my terminated accounts, my dormant accounts, etc., elder abuse accounts, perhaps a list of all the people that requested the call center to change their password in the last 48 hours, etc. If you have endpoint solution, malware detection, edge device detection alerts, you can bring those in, and that can be used to, again, enrich the information. Any interactions that are deemed to be relevant with your CSRs in the call center can be brought in. So all of that information then is displayed and at the fingertips of the fraud analyst and any other individuals within your organization that you choose to expose the interface to. The Enterprise API is also a key component of this. This is a comprehensive framework of web services that allows you to map data from multiple entities across multiple vendors. Some of these come from various vendors, these solutions that you have deployed, and they may have different namespaces. In some cases, they share the same namespace, but it's key to be able to map those to the same individual or business. And another key aspect of this, that it's real-time, and it's bidirectional. It's not just injecting data in from these various systems, but you can also get real scores back in real time, and typically in the context of milliseconds, that can include information such as hold release recommendations for wires and ACHs. You can use it to drive up step-top authentication in your online or mobile channels. You can do out-of-band notification to your mobile device. You can perhaps control the session to limit the activities or risky activities that an account can do, and you can do this, again, in real time without necessarily human intervention. So to summarize, we're launching Omni-channel, and this is your opportunity to get started with us. We're announcing our early adopter program effective immediately. You can be one of the first FIs to benefit from this. What we are looking to do is select approximately 5 institutions that have one or more products that can benefit from the features of Omni-channel and the capability of Omni-channel. If this is something that interests you, please contact your account representative, and we can get started with the logistics. And then we're looking to start general availability in the 4th quarter of this year, but there will be an early adopter program and then limited availability program announced as the year progresses. And again, I want to thank you for this opportunity to show you what we're doing in Omni-channel, and we're very excited about this opportunity. We're going to switch now over to start taking questions from the audience, and I see a few of you have been submitting questions, so let me see if I can bring those over. The first question is, are you seeing ATO, account takeover, on mobile, web, and apps? And the answer is yes, absolutely. The mobile device is a rich treasure trove of information. You know, you have data in there from not just your financial applications, but you also have your social network information. You have your email contact list. You have all kinds of information that is very valuable to a fraudster. So we are seeing cases where there's been account takeover and the device has been infected, and it is being used as a vector for attack. Okay, can branch check-in and clearing checks be incorporated in this solution? Yes, absolutely. The way that the integrated risk database is structured is that you can upload data that is structured or unstructured information, and it can be done so that you can join that information to each account. So you can have a unique account identifier that will then be used to join that information to session data, to wire data, whatever alert is being investigated in the visual analytics. Another question is IP address verification. Is IP address verification part of the screening process? Yes, one of the key uses that we use for IP addresses is for geolocation derived information. So we can give you, for example, geolocation anomalies that indicate that the user may be traveling, or it could be that a fraudster is trying to access the account from a remote location. And so we keep behavioral analytic risk information about the usual transactions or locations from which the user accesses the system. We also can give you velocity data about distance traveled over time and anomalies that may indicate that that particular user couldn't have possibly traveled the distance between two different points in the given amount of time between the two channels. Let's say, do you plan on offering an integrated risk case system in the near future? The answer to that is we see an opportunity. We do have a purpose-built case management tool built into the tool that allows you to start documenting the actions taken on a particular alert or a group of alerts and linking those to one or more accounts. But we don't see ourselves as taking the place of a case management system. Rather, we see an opportunity to integrate with case management systems so that you can bring in data that resides in those systems that may be related to other activities within the bank. For example, AML, BSA type of documentation. It could be other information that is being tracked in the case management system that can help inform the decisions that a fraud analyst is making while they're interacting with the visual analytics. Another question is, can you articulate more about behavioral analytics, how patterns are determined in a fast-moving environment? Okay, excellent question. One of the key points about behavioral analytics, and one of the factors that differentiates Guardian Analytics is that we build a unique digital profile for every customer that you have. And we focus on really understanding and modeling good behavior. So instead of focusing on what a fraudster might do and having a priori knowledge or trying to anticipate the tactics that a fraudster would use, we focus on knowing each individual and each business very intimately. And then whenever their activities start to drift from normal, then that incrementally will elevate the risk. Or as they converge more on normal, it'll mitigate the risk. So behavioral analytics is driven by predictive analytics and statistical analysis, and it's agnostic to any change in tactics on the part of the fraudster. That's one of the things that makes it so effective, is the fact that a fraudster will find it near impossible to duplicate all the behaviors of a legitimate user. So we typically will build all that information directly from the data, and it's got machine learning built in so that you don't have to train the system. It learns automatically from every single interaction, so it gets smarter and smarter, and you don't have to build rules, you don't have to maintain rules. Behavioral analytics will handle that information for you and maintain the profiles automatically. I think we're up against the clock here. So what we will do is I'm going to turn it back over to Renacia, and we're going to be answering the remainder of the questions through email. We have your contact information here, so if we didn't get to your question, we'll be happy to respond and provide information on those. If you have any additional questions, always please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll make sure that you get a response.
Okay, and thank you everybody for attending today's webinar. Like Luis said, the questions that were not answered will be answered later on today. And just a reminder that this webinar is recorded, and we will send you the slides and the link of the recorded webinar in the next few days. Thank you, and have a good day.